They were captured under a burning Sicilian sun. Dust, sweat, and fear clung to every man as Italian soldiers were rounded up by advancing Allied troops. Their faces showed defeat, but their hearts still beat with uncertainty. What awaited them next? No one knew. Rumors ran wild through the captured ranks. Some whispered that the Americans were ruthless, that prisoners would be shot on sight. Others prayed that surrender meant mercy. As the Allied jeeps rumbled closer, the Italians dropped their rifles and raised their trembling hands. Silence. Only the sound of boots crunching on gravel and distant artillery. To their surprise, the American soldiers didn't shout or threaten. Instead, they offered water. A canteen passed from one set of trembling hands to another, the first sign that something unexpected was happening. Corporal Rossi, a young Italian radio operator, couldn't believe it. "Why would they give us water?" he muttered. "Aren't we the enemy?" The Americans were trained to handle prisoners humanely. Geneva Convention rules were followed with discipline. For the Italians, it felt like a strange dream. They were escorted to trucks, not execution grounds. Food was distributed: white bread, canned beans, and even chocolate bars. For many, it was the first time they had tasted such things in months. Inside one truck, the men sat silently, eyes darting around. Could this be a trick? Were they being taken somewhere to die? Hours passed, and instead of gunfire, they saw the gates of a makeshift camp, tents, guards, and a Red Cross flag waving above. Their hearts slowly calmed. That night, for the first time since capture, they were given blankets. It wasn't comfort, but it was safety, something rare in war. Days turned into weeks. The POW camp became a strange world of its own, guarded but peaceful. The men were given work, mostly farming or repairing roads. They expected cruelty. Instead, they found order and even kindness. American medics treated their wounds. Some soldiers even joked with them through broken Italian. The hatred they expected never came. Corporal Rossi watched in disbelief as one wounded Italian sergeant was carried to the infirmary by 2 American soldiers. He'd seen Germans execute their prisoners before. This was different, incomprehensible. Rossi began writing letters to his mother in Naples, something he thought he'd never do again. "They are not what we were told," he wrote. "The Americans, they treat us like men." Over time, the Italians began to regain strength. Some volunteered to help in camp kitchens, others repaired fences or played soccer during rest hours. The guards didn't see them as enemies anymore. Some even joined the games, laughing with men who once wore opposing uniforms. War outside still raged, but inside the camp, humanity had quietly returned. One day, word spread. Mussolini had fallen. Italy was changing sides. Confusion rippled through the camp. What did that mean for them? The Americans gathered the prisoners and explained that Italy had surrendered to the Allies. Many Italians cheered. Others wept. For months they had believed their fate was death. Now it was something far more powerful: hope. New uniforms came, simple, marked Italian service units. Some POWs were given the chance to work with Allied logistics instead of being confined. Rossi volunteered. "If this helps end the war sooner," he said, "then maybe we all go home faster." Working alongside American soldiers, the Italians began to see a different kind of battle, not fought with guns, but with compassion and understanding. At mealtime, they shared stories. One American from Kansas told Rossi about baseball. Rossi tried to explain football, Italian football. Both laughed. Slowly, the barriers fell. The war seemed far away, even though the sounds of distant bombing still echoed some nights. In time, They were moved to camps in the United States. Crossing the Atlantic under guard, they expected harsher treatment. But when they arrived, they were greeted with clean barracks, steady food, and a promise: you will be treated fairly. In the fields of Texas and the forests of Minnesota, Italian POWs worked, sang, and built friendships that defied the logic of war. They wrote home often, their letters filled with disbelief. "Mother," one wrote, "the enemy treats us better than our own officers ever did." Some learned English. Others found faith again. War had broken them, but captivity had begun to rebuild them. In the evenings, they listened to radios under supervision, hearing news of Italy's liberation inch by inch. Rossi began to dream of home again, not as a soldier, but as a man who understood both sides of war. The Americans encouraged art, music, even theater in the camps. Some Italians painted murals. Others performed songs from Naples that made the guards smile. Through simple acts, the lines between captor and captive blurred. Humanity had won a small, quiet victory. By 1944, many Italian POWs were no longer seen as enemies, but as allies in spirit. Letters from their families spoke of hunger, bombings, and rebuilding. The Americans sometimes sent extra rations home through the Red Cross. Rossi could never forget that kindness. When the war finally ended in 1945, the announcement came quietly over a loudspeaker. Some men cheered, others cried. Everyone fell silent after, thinking of those who never made it. Repatriation began slowly. Ships waited to take them home, not as broken prisoners, but as men who had seen the true meaning of mercy. From Sicily to the U.S. heartland, from fear to faith, the story of these Italian POWs became one of the most overlooked miracles of the war. In the midst of global chaos, compassion had survived. When the ship finally docked at Naples, the Italian POWs stepped onto their homeland with trembling hands. The air smelled of salt, ash, and memory. The city they had dreamed of returning to was scarred. Bombed buildings, hungry faces, and silence where laughter once lived. Families waited at the docks, holding faded photographs. Mothers wept as they recognized sons they thought long dead. Some men found no one waiting at all, only ruins where homes had been. Rossi walked the familiar streets in disbelief. He passed the church where he'd been baptized, now with half its roof gone. Children scavenged among rubble for food. War had ended, but peace still looked like survival. He visited his mother's small apartment. The walls were cracked, but her eyes still shone. She embraced him as though she could erase all the years of fear. "You came home," she whispered. "That's all that matters." Many POWs struggled to adjust. Some towns saw them as traitors or cowards. Others treated them as heroes who had endured the unimaginable. But Rossi and his comrades carried something rare: gratitude toward the men who had once been their captors. Rossi began writing again, not to his mother, but to one of the American guards he had befriended. "You said kindness was stronger than fear," he wrote. "I see that now. You helped us remember we were still human." The Americans replied months later. In Kansas, that same guard sent a photograph, his family standing in a wheat field, smiling. On the back it read, "We all made it home." Years passed. The former POWs found work. Some became farmers, others teachers, engineers, or artists. Many shared stories that no one believed at first, that the enemy had offered mercy, not death. In the 1950s, Rossi visited a small American military cemetery in Italy. He placed flowers on graves marked with unfamiliar names. "You taught me compassion," he said quietly. "Even in war, you chose humanity. As an old man, Rossi often told his grandchildren, war shows the worst of men, but sometimes it also reveals the best. His story became a reminder that kindness doesn't end when the fighting does. It lives on, passed down like a quiet inheritance of hope. When historians later asked those former POWs about their experience, they didn't speak of barbed wire or guards. They spoke of water offered under a burning sun, bread shared between enemies, and the strange realization that mercy can bloom even in war. And so the story of the Italian POWs wasn't just about survival. It was about the victory of empathy over vengeance, a lesson that decades later still feels urgent.